Welcome to A Brush with Color, watercolor painting group. Hi, my name is Charlene. I'm really excited that you'll be following along with me on this demonstration. Each week, we'll be learning new techniques and actually completing paintings. This video covers the basics to get you comfortable with holding your brush and mixing paints. This is a safe space to learn. And we're going to have fun. So let's get started. Okay, let's talk about our tools. Paintbrush, palette with our paints that you've already been given, and also known as pigment. So paints and pigments are the same thing. We've got our water, a spray bottle, just a little spray bottle, and a paper towel, and of course our paper. Now, you've probably been given a size 6 or a size 8 brush, but just know that not all brushes are created equal. For example, here are 2 size 8 brushes from different brands, different manufacturers. So you can see one is really long. These are round. These are called a round brush, but you can see the bristles, the brush on this one is much longer than this one, and the tip's a little different, and also the belly of the brush. So this is known as the tip of the brush. This is known as the belly. This flat part is the belly. As you go along, you're going to identify which brushes you enjoy using, which ones work for you and which ones don't. You can go from very, very small to ginormous. Here's a larger brush here. So it depends on what you're painting. And they go much bigger than this as well. You've been given a notebook, watercolor pad, acid-free, cold press paper, 140 pound. That's a good average type of watercolor paper, and this one is great for practice, and some of you might even enjoy it to do your painting from as well. You can see it's got quite a bit of texture. There's also what we call arches. Arches is a really nice paper to paint with, and you can see this one, arches, doesn't have as much texture as this one. Let's see if I've got something to show you here, which I do. Right here. Okay, so you can see this painting is done on the notepad, and you can actually see the texture, how the paint sort of falls into the texture and the bumps. And this is done on arches, and this one is much smoother. Anyway, we'll talk a lot more about paper as we go along. Okay, now let's talk about the paints or the pigments. So the colors that you've been given are Perylene red, Hansa yellow medium, French ultramarine, quinacridone burnt orange, undersea green, carbazole violet, and neutral tint. These are all Daniel Smith extra fine watercolors. You can get these easily on Amazon or any of the art store links that you'll get throughout the classes. And again, they're called pigments or paints. So you'll hear them go back and forth. So what we want to do to start with is we're going to activate our pigments, our paints. And we're going to use our spray bottle, our cheap old spray bottle that we can get at the dollar store or Hobby Lobby for way cheaper than you can get it at Michael's. Just saying. So spraying water on your paints will help to activate them. It'll get the pigments flowing. And we're going to do some really fun little demos to start with. It'll help you use your brush. And what we'll do is we're just going to pick a color. So pick a color, any color. Let's pick, I'm going to pick red. Okay, Perylene red. So I'm going to make a puddle. We're going to add water. Everything in watercolor is about the pigment and the water. And the paper, the technique on the paper. So the more water you add, and the less pigment, then the lighter the color will be when it goes, or the lighter the value, also intensity. So the lighter the value will be on your paper. The more pigment you put on, that will give you higher value. So lots of pigment, less water, strong value. So here, I'm going to show you, okay? So we're going to make a puddle. Everything we do, we'll do in puddles, okay? So we add water, take some water from our container. We're going to make a puddle, and we're just going to go like this, okay? So that, you can see, this is the value. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go deeper into our pigment. So we're going to get a thicker blob of pigment, of paint, and then we're going to put it on. Do you see the difference? So that is a value. This is a light value. That is a darker value. Okay, and that all has to do with how much water you are adding to the pigment. Okay, so let's start with just some lines. Get in there, do a puddle, smush it around, and just take your brush and hold it perpendicular like this, and just go like this. Make some lines up and down. Add some more pigment. Hold your brush up and down, and see how it changes when you change the way you hold your brush, and when you use the tip of your brush or the belly of your brush. Ah, look at that. See how that changes? Just play around with it for a bit. Yeah, that's cool. And we're not creating anything. We're just learning a few techniques. Okay, add some more colors. So add more pigment. Okay, add more water. See the difference? More pigment, less water. That's pretty cool, isn't it? See, we don't have to really create anything till we're ready. Okay, let's do a circle. So we're just gonna go back into our puddle. We're gonna hold our brush up and down, okay? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a circle, and we're gonna use our tip of our brush and create a circle, holding it up and down, and then fill in the center. See that? If you use your belly of your brush, this is what will happen. It's harder to control. It's harder to control your circle. If you use the point of the tip of your brush, look at how nice you can control that circle. Isn't that cool? And don't worry if you can't make a perfect circle. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're not here to create perfection. Progress, not perfection. And you can always go back into your circle. If you missed, see, look at, I missed a little piece, a little bit there. I can add a little bit. Tap on your paper towel to get rid of too much water. If you have too much water on your brush, then that can create a problem as well. Okay, there you go. Let's do it again. Let's add just a little more pigment, and we're gonna go do a circle again. Okay, just around. Okay, be gentle. Okay, there you go. And you can see the different values that I've led up to. All right, let's work on some lines. Now, we're gonna do I've got a lot of water in here that's moving around. Sometimes you only want to activate the paint that you're gonna be working with. Okay, we're going to work on some lines. Let's just do some lines. Belly of the brush, tip of the brush. Ooh, look at how tiny that line is that I could do with just the tip of the brush. Tip of the brush. A little more pigment. tip of the brush. Ooh, tip of the brush, belly of the brush. Yeah, it shows you a completely different look on your lines. Okay, we have lots of paper in this book, so we can keep moving forward. Use new pages as you go along because we're just having fun here. So we're going to do this line now. We're going to do an intentional line, which means we're going to put the tip, have the tip, start with the tip, and then we're going to push the brush down. So the belly of the brush moves across the line, and then we're going to lift up the brush again so we end up with a tip. So let's do that again. Tip, down, tip, up. Now, you can see I ran out of pigment, so we need to get some more. Make sure we have lots of pigment on our brush and on the belly of the brush, because if we don't, we're going to get this problem. That can be a really nice technique though, by the way. Okay, let's do some more lines. Tip, down, tip, up, tip, down, tip, up. And this takes practice, you can see. Tip up, belly, tip. See? Tip, belly, tip. That's kind of cool, hey? And now, this one is really neat because this is kind of one of the techniques that you're going to use for lots of petals and leaves and things. So we're going to do this, but we're going to do it in short spurts and tie them all together, link them together. So we're going to go tip, belly, tip, belly, tip, belly, tip, belly, tip. Cool. Okay. Tip, belly, tip, belly, tip, belly, tip, belly. Now, you see, sometimes we run out of paint, so we need to get that belly really coated with lots of pigment and lots of water. Okay, one more time. Tip, belly, tip, belly, tip, belly, tip, belly. See how we can make it a little leaf like this? Tip, belly, tip. Is that cool or what? Tip, belly, tip. Tip, belly, tip. Tip, belly, tip. Tip, belly, tip. Woo! And there's a little swoosh in there too. Okay, that was fun. Now, we're going to do some wet on wet. So far we've done wet on dry. What that means is that we've had wet paint on our wet brush. So we go water, paint on a dry paper. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go wet on wet. And what we do is we're going to make a wet, just as a practice, we are going to make a wet square across our paper. Doesn't really matter how you're going to put that water on there, but you're going to make a wet square. You might be able to see I have a little bit of red in my water, which is okay. And you can move your paper and look at it from the side so you can see is the whole thing sheening. Because if you're missing a spot, you want to go back in there and get it. Okay, so we've created a wet square on our paper. It doesn't have to be too wet, but make sure it's wet enough. And then we're going to take our color. I'm going to change our color for this one. Let's do blue here. I like this French ultramarine blue. It's so nice. And what we're going to do is, because this is wet, right? Wet brush, wet water, wet block on the paper, and we're going to just dab our paint into that wet. And look at how that moves. Look at how it moves on its own. That's what watercolor is all about. It's how is it moving? How is it moving on the paper? And quite frankly, we can't control that. Let's put a little darker. I'm going to put a little heavier pigment in there. A little darken the value in the center of those. You can use any colors you want. Let's just stick with one color, okay, for this exercise, because the next one we're going to add a second color. Isn't that neat? Isn't that wonderful how the paint just flows however it wants, not how we want, but how it is going to do it. All right, let's try this one. We're going to do another wet on wet, but we're going to mingle the paints. So let's do another block, okay? Another block here. Yep, not too much water. I put a lot of water in there, so. Okay, and I'm going to take yellow. Oh yeah, this Hansa yellow medium is so beautiful. Okay, and I'm just going to put some, just going to move the paint around with my brush, mostly with my, let's see, just move some paint around. It doesn't have to be over the whole thing. In fact, leave some free. And then I'm going to take the blue, just for the contrast so you can see. Then I'm just going to put some blue into the yellow. Look at that. Okay, yes. That is so neat. And then watch this. I'm going to put just a little bit more blue. And I'm going to pick up my paper and move it around and watch how it will stream down. And if you're doing it while the paper, if you tap on it while the paper is standing at a vertical or horizontal or whatever, but standing up, tilted, then you're going to watch the paint go. And then if it's not going enough and you need some more water, just put some more water on your brush. Look at that. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, let's see. Let's put a little more yellow in there just cause we can. Oh yeah. Blend and mingle with the other paints. You can see what's really interesting about this is that the edges are soft. All the edges are soft. There's no hard, blunt edge. Like that's a hard, blunt edge right there. Okay, so that is wet on wet blended. We're going to do one more wet on wet and with a couple of different colors just because we can. I'm going to do another block. Oh, see, this one has a little yellow. I didn't completely clean off my brush, but that's okay, so you can see what we've got going on here instead of it just looking like a nothing. And then we're going to work on a couple of different colors. So instead of just 2, we'll try 3 or 4 different colors. So here's our yellow, wet on wet, remember? So we want to get our brush wet and our puddle wet, and we'll just put some wet in here, some yellow in here. That is so pretty. Okay, and then we're going to wash off our brush. Now you might notice that I've got everything on the right-hand side of my paper because I'm right-handed. If I had my water over here and my towel here, and I'd be going back and forth and dripping paint all over. So let's go with blue again. Put some blues in here. Now we're going to do some, let's do some purple, some violets. Oh, you can see the colors are kind of mixing even when you touch the yellow and the violet, they mix in together. Okay, now I'm gonna just mix them in or move my paper around so that we can see how this will Take a little bit of red. Use any color you want. And look at how the blue and the yellow have kind of turned into a green there, haven't they? Yeah. So mix and mingle, mix and mingle. Maybe a little bit of quinacridone burnt orange. I like that one. Oh, it almost looks the same as the red on this when it gets with that yellow. Okay, that's gorgeous. Now, good job, team. Okay, let's do another. We're going to work on washes. This is what we call a wash, and we're going to start with a wet on wet wash. Now, a wash, a flat wash, this is going to be a flat wash, is a single color that you apply evenly, wet on dry, or even on damp paper. So if you don't want to have too much water on there, just dry off your brush and pick up some of that extra water that's left there. So we're going to do wet on wet, and I'm going to use blue, and we're going to go across. They don't really have a lot of pigment in there, so we're going to just go like this. There you go. See that bead that I just picked up? Is that not cool or what? This should help you to create a more even line across, although with wet on wet, the colors blend, or the water moves the paint, so sometimes it's harder to get a flat wet on wet, but it's possible. Okay, let's do a wet on dry. Okay, so this is dry paper, wet, water, pigment with water, okay? And we're gonna do a square like this, and this is gonna be a flat wash, wet on dry. So start at the top here and go across. And now I'm gonna tilt my paper just a little bit, and you can see this little bead here. And I'm gonna grab onto that bead, and we're gonna go across. And I'm running out of pigment, so I'm gonna start again. See that bead? I'm gonna grab that bead. See that bead? Go across. That is a flat wash, all one color, no lines, just perfectly across, and that is wet on dry. Let's see if we can do it with a little more pigment. Let's see, let's try one more time, wet on dry. We're gonna start, I'm tilting the paper up a bit, just so that we get the maximum opportunity to grab that bead. And we're gonna go across. Now see that? See how this bead goes down? I'm gonna stick my tip in it, go across. Here's the bead, go across. Get a little more pigment. Go across, grab that bead. Isn't that nice? That bead is the best thing I learned on my first class in a brush with color. Isn't that beautiful? Whew. Okay, that is flat wash, wet on dry. And this one's kind of wet on wet, wet on damp. All right, that looks really nice. Now, just practice that a few more times. And then we're gonna go on to the graded wash. The value, so you can see this value is darker than this value, which means what? It means more pigment, less water, more water, less pigment. Okay, so let's just do a graded value from dark to light just by adding water. So let's check this one out. Okay, so we're gonna start with more pigment, less water. So the value will be darker, it'll be stronger value. The values will gradiate down from dark to light. Okay, so we're gonna do this on dry, so wet on dry. And we're going to start to go across. See, that's a nice strong value. Okay, and I'm doing the bead thing here, go over. Okay, now all I'm going to do is put my brush in water, tap it on the edge, and then tap it on my towel a couple times, really lightly, because you don't want to get rid of all the water, because that's what's giving you the lighter pigment, the lighter value. Put it in the water again, tap it on my towel, and again. Okay, water, tap, tap, and again. And it'll go lighter and lighter as you go along. Water, tap, tap. Because the more water, the lighter the pigment, the lighter the value. See that? So it goes from dark to light. Let's try it one more time. More pigment. Tilt your paper a little bit so we can see the bead coming out, and we can see how the paper's reacting and the water's reacting with the pigment. Okay. And we're using a lot of the belly of the brush. That's important too. So let's start, go across. Gonna grab that. Okay, and then I'm gonna go in the water, tap, tap, cross, back, in the water, tap, tap, 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 in the water, tap, tap. Every time you go in the water, it lightens the pigment, it lightens the value. You can see this one. It's not as square as this one, but there you go. Practice, practice, practice. It's really important to be kind to yourself and to just be patient, because it takes time to learn. We have to practice, and these are just techniques that you can practice and will make you a better painter. Okay, see this blob here? Before I turn my paper, I just want to, because it's not totally dry and this blob of water is going to drip all over, so I'm going to take my towel and I'm just going to just dab it in there. Isn't that cool? And I'll pick up the paint, the excess paint. Okay. Now let's do a variegated wash. Several colors mix and mingle. We're gonna turn this into a more intentional wash, multicolor mingled wash. Okay, so we'll start with, let's start with yellow. And we're gonna go on dry. Okay, so let's do wet on dry. So we go across. Let's do 2 across, 3 across, and then I'm going to take another color. I really like to tilt it while we're learning, because that sort of shows you. And we're going to take the blue. We're going to get our belly wet, and we're going to go across. We're just going to touch the edge. Did you see that? We just touch the edge of the yellow. And the yellow runs into the blue. Well, kind of change the color too. Now, wash your brush. Let's pick up that purple. And we're gonna just touch it out right along the line where the blue is. See that? Same thing. It's just, see those little beads show up, hey? Isn't that nice? So the values are pretty light. See how it's just running into one another. Let's try our green. I love this green. This is undersea green. Oh man, I love it. Okay, we're gonna do this one right along. We're gonna touch the edge of the purple. Cool. And then one more, just because we can, we'll do an orange. And we'll touch it right along the edge of that green. See how that green just starts flowing. I didn't use really high pigment values here. So let me try a little higher pigment values. Let's do blue. Maybe one more. Oh, see the difference in the pigment, in the value? Much stronger, hey? Then I'm gonna take the, let's do the green now. Let's make a nice puddle with that green, get lots of pigment in there. And we're gonna just go across and see what happens. Woo! That looks really nice. See how the green is starting to flow down, or the blue is starting to flow down into the green? And then I'm going to take a yellow, because you'll be able to see a nice strong yellow. Just touch that edge of that green. It's starting, the green is starting to dry a bit, so you can see how the yellow is blending up into the green. So sometimes it blends up, sometimes it blends down, just depends. And this one I left a nice bit of water along it. So I'm gonna take that purple again. Watch this, when I touch this here. Oh, and look at it, changes the color too, because purple and yellow make a deep, deep plum. Isn't that beautiful? That's variegated wash. So it's washing over the paper and it's blending into each other. So wet on dry. So that is something, again, that you can practice. Okay, one more thing about wash. Let's do what we call a streaky wash. Okay, you can see I've got a little bit of color on this wet. On wet. And we're just going to do a streaky wash where it just runs over the paper. So let's do this red, nice bright red. I love red. Okay, and we're just going to go like this. Just put some blobs of paint, of pigment, and just let it go. And then, see, I missed a bit of wet on here, so it goes around the wet and leaves the white, leaves that dry patch on the paper, leaves it clear. It's not going to go where there's no water. So that you would call a streaky wash. Also notice that we have edges here. So the edges on the wet on wet are soft. Let's see. Let's do a leaf. And we're going to blend it in a bit. So we're going to create a hard edge. So let's take our green, because leaves are usually green, but it does not matter. And we're going to create a leaf using our technique we learned, which is tip, down, around, tip up, and then come back to it and go tip, down, around, tip up, okay? And we can move this. Okay, so this is going to create a hard edge. We're going to take this color and we're going to put a quinacridone orange right down the center of it and create a hard edge. Just going to take a lot of pigment and put it right down the center. See how this has created a hard, what we might call, it's starting to blend in now, but a hard edge. So here we go. That's a hard edge. Once you let it dry a little bit, it becomes quite hard. And what we're going to do is we're going to dry off our brush. We're going to dry off our brush and we're going to take a little itty bitty bit of water and we're going to just soften up that edge. See how we can just take the tip of our brush and soften it. And I'm going to dry my brush. Get a little bit more water. I'm going to just soften that edge. Just put a little more water in there. See how we can blend that edge down. Let's soften that up. Soften that up. See, you can use the belly to soften it. Use a little more water. Here, we'll go into this one here. See, we've got the two paints and we want them to blend a little more. Just grab the edge here. Just grab the edge of that. Make sure you got water in there. And pull that edge into the other paint. Pull that edge out. It's nice. Yeah, it looks really nice. So you can soften edges in a number of ways. You can just use the belly of your brush, clean brush, a little bit of water, and move it around. There you go. Okay, let's do some circles. We're going to get the page, and we're going to do some circles on dry paper, and we're going to add a shade and do some lifting. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to change up my water just because it's getting a little murky. Okay, and I'm going to use blues here. If you've got too much paint or water in there, dry off your brush, clean it, dry it off, and watch this miracle happen. It's going to suck up some of that paint into the belly of the brush. Is that not cool? Dry it off again, put it in there, dry it off. Okay, let's get a clean space here on our paper. Let's do a circle. I'm doing a fairly big one to show you. So I went back and I got some more paint, which is just fine. You can do that. Okay, so I've got my circle here. I'm going to dry off my brush. And first, I'm going to have a dry brush. Just going to let this dry just a bit. So, but while it's still damp, I'm going to lift off the center. So did you see that? I dried off, I cleaned and dried off my brush. And then I went in and I used my brush to lift off the paint. Sun, where's your sun coming from? So we're going to make the assumption that your sun, here, let's put it here, the sun is here. Okay, so if the sun's coming down here, the sun would be beating on your object here. So we would want it to have that light spot where the sun shines on it. And so below would be darker. So the actual shadow will be below here. So let's get some more paint. And we can use blue. We can use the darker blue. And we're just going to make a shadow in here. We're just going to add some around here using the same color. Or you can always use a darker. You could use the neutral. Now, neutral tint is really cool because you can mix it with other colors just to make them darker. So here, I just put a little itty bitty bit of neutral in there. I kind of didn't really want it to go all the way to the bottom, but it's still wet, so that's okay. We can just lift that off here. See how we just lift paint? Okay, and then to make it even cooler, we're going to take this blue and we're going to, what else would happen? I mean, this would be darker. The underbelly would be darker. But also, this would be darker underneath here, right? So we would have a shadow under our circle, wouldn't we? Let's grab a little more dark here. A little more. I'm going to do a little darker here. Yeah. And this will anchor your object. It'll anchor your, I think it looks like a blueberry personally, or it's getting close. It'll anchor your blueberry with the shadow by having something on the bottom of it is always a great idea. You'll see that as we go along too. So you see, we've learned how to lift out the color. We've got the shadow underneath. This is going a bit far in here, so we can lift this out here as well. There's so much you can do with this. Okay, let's try it again. Circle. I'm going to try a different color this time. Let's do green. Okay, circle. That's great. Okay, so we've got our basic circle. We're going to wash off and dry off our brush. And we're going to lift the pigment off with the belly of our dry brush. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. All right, and then we're going to make it a little darker. It needs to dry just a second, but I'm going to go ahead anyway. We're going to take some more dark green, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to mix the green with the neutral to make it a darker. See, it stays green, just makes it a little bit darker. That's what the neutral tint does. Okay, and we're going to go make the shadow along here a little more intentional this time. Yep. And don't worry if it doesn't look perfect or it's not how you wanted it. We're just practicing, and it's just a piece of paper and a little bit of paint, and you can start again. Okay, so I'm going to take this dark color again. I still have some on my brush. I'm going to make a shadow. Make this one a little bit more round than the last one. Remember, the sun is coming from this angle, so it's going to touch on your item over here. Is that cool? Okay, and look I don't have to have paint in every little itty bitty space. Like, I can have some spaces left open, right? I'm gonna just kind of move this around here a little wee bit. Okay, well, that concludes the basics of watercolors. You did it. Did you remember to breathe? Congratulations! Give yourself a huge round of applause. You did a great job. Okay, let's move on to our first painting. Our leaves.